Oh, this is a World War II video. Sorry about that. That's better. While I'm here, I'll probably take off this bag, because I'm going to be standing here for a while and I don't want to have heavy things on me. So thanks for clicking. My name's Teddy. I'm a representative of the British Royal Engineers from World War II. I've noticed that there's not a whole lot of British reenacting content on YouTube, so I figured I might as well give a little rundown on some cool stuff that we use at reenactments as British reenactors, and I thought, what better thing to make a video on than the British Lee Enfield rifle? So without further ado, this is the Lee Enfield No. 1 Mark III. The Lee Enfield is a .303 caliber rifle that officially entered military service under the British Army in 1895 and ended its venue as the standard service weapon of the United Kingdom in 1957. However, the .303 Lee Enfield remained in service well into the 60s and saw limited usage throughout the Vietnam War by Australian and British forces. They also made a 7.62mm variant of the Lee Enfield called the L42A1, which was used extensively up until the 90s. There's also plenty of instances of the Canadian Rangers using the Lee Enfield all the way up until 2018. This all goes to show that the Lee Enfield is widely considered by many people, myself included, to be one of the best bolt-action rifles in history. The Lee Enfield was such a popular rifle that there are even a few instances of Axis soldiers using them on the front lines of World War II. And you may be asking yourself, why was this rifle so popular? What made it better than other rifles of the time? First of all, it had a very smooth and easy to operate. It had a very smooth and easy to operate action with two built-in safeties located here on the firing pin called half cock, as well as right here, which is called the thumb safety. Its very simple design made it super easy to disassemble and clean the weapon, as well as making it very easy to diagnose problems. At the end of the day, because the design was just so simple, there wasn't a whole lot that could go wrong with this gun. Another good factor was the extreme length of its barrel, which made it very effective at long range. Another unique thing about this rifle compared to other bolt-action rifles of the time is that it had a detachable magazine, which allowed it to hold an extra 5 rounds compared to other bolt-action rifles, which it could only hold 5 at a time. This bolt-action rifle could hold 10. Another very useful thing about this rifle was a piece of ancient technology called the stacking swivel, which was a swivel that would be located right here and would allow you to stack 3 of these rifles together at a time. These stacking swivels are super useful for making displays at our reenactments, as well as having our rifles readily available if we need to grab them at any given moment in time. We tend to use these super often at tacticals, which are basically reenactments without any spectators allowed, because they let our rifles be readily available if we need to grab them on a short moment's notice. The biggest issue with these stacking swivels, however, is that a lot of modern day rifles do not have them on anymore. It's pretty hit or miss if you buy a Lee Enfield whether or not it'll have an intact stacking swivel. A lot of my buddies in my unit had their rifles come with one, while mine did not. Another super notable pro of the Lee Enfield was its ability to be cycled while still shouldered. This was made possible by the noticeably smaller size of the bolt compared to other bolt-action rifles of its time, which were much longer and would obstruct your face if you were trying to cycle it while still shouldering the rifle. It's getting way too hot in here. I need to put on my hat. Another thing, this is called the General Service Cap. It was basically just the hat that British soldiers were issued when they weren't able to be wearing their helmets but still had to be wearing coverage over their head. The general rule was that British soldiers had to have coverage over their head at all times. So if you weren't underneath the roof of a building or a tent or a tarp, you had to be wearing either a hat or your helmet at all times. So anyways, to get back on topic, of course, with any rifle in history, with a lot of pros, there's also going to be cons. The biggest issue with the Lee Enfield was its susceptibility to jamming under certain conditions. One of the first reasons that the Lee Enfield would jam is because of the way that the cartridges are rimmed. These rimmed cartridges could get caught on each other inside of the gun and prevent the bolt from going forward. This issue is very easy to fix, however. You can fix it by simply pushing down on the top round until it pops out and then sending the bolt home. Another big issue with the Lee Enfield, as with any other gun, is that when too much mud enters the gun, it can cause a lot of the inner components to stop working as intended. The most common of these factors was the follower being gummed, the bolt itself, and sometimes even the extractor being too messed up to function properly. Now, like I said, this is common with any firearm you get your hands on, and the best way to prevent this from happening is to simply take care of your rifle and clean it regularly. If you're having a rifle that jams in combat, it's kind of a skill issue. Another issue with the Lee Enfield, and most other bolt-action rifles of its time for that matter, was that its very long length made it very difficult for clearing buildings, which is becoming more and more common as time went on in the Second World War. Of course, the solution to this problem, as the British discovered, was to remove that building from existence instead of sending troops in there. Try telling that to the Russians, though. There is a lot better of an in-depth look at British close-quarters combat, which I will be covering in another video, because it is very interesting to look at compared to what our combat standards are today. So let's say the apocalypse has started. The kids smoked too much COVID-19 and it mutated, and now the world is over. You raid the house of a reenactor, and all you find is this rifle. First of all, good luck finding a single round of .303 anywhere in the United States of America. But second of all, you should learn how to use this rifle, and that's what I'll be teaching you right now. So the first thing you should do when you find a Lee Enfield is load the rounds in. Now there are two ways of doing this. You can first load the rounds in one by one by hand by pushing them down from the top with your thumb. Or you can use these British issue stripper clips. These clips are meant to be disposable, so when you finish loading your round, you're supposed to let it hit the ground. However, we reenactors don't really like to do that because of the fact that they're not disposable to us. We kind of have to buy more. In order to load this rifle with the stripper clip, you have to first insert it into these two slots right here. And then you simply take your thumb and you push the rounds in. Once you've finished with that, you simply send the bolt forward and the stripper clip will automatically fall out of the rifle. Now there's a very common misconception that doing that with the stripper clip will somehow damage the rifle. There's a more in-depth version of what I'm about to say on the channel Jared AF. He does a much better job of explaining this than I'm about to do, so go check out that video in the description, it's very good. But essentially what happens when you do that is the stripper clip is only contacting this on 2 points. So when the bolt comes forward, it basically pushes the stripper clip back like this and over and out, which doesn't damage anything at all. It's meant to do that. So when you do eventually close the bolt, it'll take this top round right here and push it up and into the chamber, and then when you close it, it'll lock the bolt in place ready for you to pull the trigger. When you do end up pulling the trigger, it rotates an inner sear of the gun, which then releases the firing pin, sending it forward fast enough to ignite the primer of the rifle. The next step after you've done that is to simply rotate the bolt up and back, which ejects the spent round and allows you to push the newest round into the chamber. This resets the process, which allows it to be done all over again if needed. There were a lot of different kinds of Lee Enfields throughout history, one of the most notable being this one, which was in both World Wars. There was also the Lee Enfield No. 4 Mark I, which was the same rifle as this, except the front of the gun looked marginally different and took a different kind of bayonet, as well as the rear sight being located above the receiver instead of right here. There was also a jungle variant which got sent into the Pacific Theater during World War II, and like I said earlier, there was also a 7.62mm conversion for the Lee Enfield that was used as a sniper rifle up until the mid-1990s. All in all, the Lee Enfield is a very good rifle that has held up swimmingly to modern day standards. In a lot of instances, I would take this rifle over a lot of the modern day rifles I have at my disposal. I know what I'm using for any home defense situation. Like imagine you're coming around the corner of a house you're robbing and you just see this. I would shit myself, personally. This gun has withstood the test of time through and through, survived 2 world wars, and is generally pretty underrated in the world of historical firearms. But that's all I have to say about this rifle in this video. Of course, if I missed anything, please let me know. I'd be happy to cover it in a future video. And of course, stay tuned for my next video where I'll talk about urban warfare in the British Army, as well as a lot of other cool history facts that you might not know about the British Army. Thanks for watching. I will see you later.